Season 5 of The Loud House is the most polarizing season of the show. The Louds are back for a new school year and have to hit the ground running, facing new challenges and changes to the status quo. Change isn't always pretty, but they found a way to make it work. We've made it to the Rubiner era, what one could call modern Loud House. Let's pack our bags and see what it has in store for us. Alright, let's not beat around the bush. A lot of you are probably here to hear about the age up. This season picks up directly where the last one left off. We've had last year's spring semester, a vacation during the summer, and now we've hit the following school year. Many of this season's episodes utilize fall foliage and their environmental art to set the mood. In what was a planned shakeup of the show's status quo, the Louds and their world were aged up by 1 year. The world is still more than familiar, but even a small jump had some big consequences. Lori is entering college, Lily's headed off to preschool, and the most significant? Lincoln and the gang are on their way to middle school, with the plot following suit. To a lesser extent, Leni and Lisa had some changes to their lives, but not to the same degree as some of their siblings. Interestingly though, the show's intro is completely unchanged. Here's Lori and 1-year-old Lily acting as if nothing happened at all. Now, remember what we learned in Middlemen? How there's nothing to worry about in middle school and then all things will work out? Throw that in the trash. Middle school is hell. It's not all bad, but we see the Dog Squad tackle some serious problems in their new setting. Schooled, our first 1-hour special, really set the tone for the season's first half. Even Clyde is terrified of the change, and we see some very disturbing imagery during the special's opening number. And that's not getting into the horrors of Lincoln's new homeroom. One of the reasons why Kings of the Con is so hated is that it took a well-liked episode like Pulp Friction and made a bastardized sequel that does a disservice to the original. Schooled does this same thing, but with the aforementioned middlemen. Lincoln and Clyde's entire experience ended up being pointless. And remember how Lynn wanted to protect the two of them so that they wouldn't have to experience what she went through? Now she's either conveniently out of the picture or actively making things worse for the group. She even tossed Lincoln into a locker that he needed to jury-rig a paperclip to escape. I know they can't just have Lynn solve every middle school conflict that the Dog Squad has to face, and she does at least give her brother a free ride to Ballhoffner's, but having her cause even more trouble was a disservice to what was otherwise a wonderful part of her character. As a matter of fact, the main cast gets put through the ringer a lot this season. Rusty gets framed for vandalism, Lori runs into issues at Fairway, the feud at Gus's games in Grub, or Lincoln struggles in school as a whole. Though part of that was on him since he forgot to turn in his sign-up form. He's also treated rather out of character by Lori and Ghosted, citing Clyde as the real brains of the Lincoln McCloud operation while writing her brother off entirely. Said brother who acts as the group leader of both the siblings and the Dog Squad, and has helped Lori on many occasions. Now, Clyde is a very intelligent kid, but he has never played the role of the duo's tactician. It'd be one thing if this took place in Clyde's imagination, playing himself up for the girl who was once his crush, but no, we're supposed to take it as canon. Thankfully though, they always find a way to fix things in the end. Even if Rubiner is having issues of his own, like Savino before him, he's having his turn stuck in the muck of broken Aesops. It's a pretty interesting parallel, all things considered, but it brings down the quality of several episodes, especially in the first half of the season. Like in Grub Snub, where the encroachment of Leni and her friends results in an all-out feud over the games in Grub. Even if neither party is the hero here, we're supposed to see Lincoln and his friends as the lesson learners who have to make concessions. Despite the rude and inconsiderate behavior of Leni's group, from taking some of the pizza that they paid for, to Miguel taking the prize Clyde wanted and taunting him over it. Or a particularly infamous example in No Bus, No Fuss, where they have to solve a disagreement with some violent 8th graders on the school bus on their own. I know Nickelodeon's all about empowering children, but the adults are useless element really killed the Aesop. Like if the fire department has to be called, you probably should get an adult involved. The rest of the Loud siblings who ride the same bus and likely would have intervened are conveniently absent here. And what about Clyde's overprotective dads? They think pickles are too dangerous. You'd think that they would be the first to confront the district office if their son was getting assaulted. If you want a rare Lola example, look no further than Strife of the Party. Lola's supposed to be looked at as the selfish one for not letting Lana plan any of their birthday parties, and then sabotaging it when Lana finally gets her turn. But considering that Lana wanted to serve trash and sewer sludge to the guests, it ended up making Lola look like the reasonable one, rightfully paranoid at the biohazard bash that nobody other than Lana would want anything to do with. One of the things this season is well known for is that there's no shortage of school plots. Many such for Lincoln, but most members of the main cast get at least one episode pertaining to their school lives. And with Lincoln getting all of these school plots, the Dog Squad is more prominent than ever. This is one of the most common complaints you'll hear about this season from those who drop the show. Too many friends, not enough louds, they take the screen time away from the family. There's definitely some validity to these complaints. This is one of their most active seasons, and Lincoln gets the majority of the school plots. But as fair as some of this criticism is, it is also much exaggerated. Let's look at the statistics. This is the amount of focused episodes each main cast member got in Season 5. If we compare it to the past couple of seasons, the numbers are pretty normal across the board. Aside from Lincoln's universal majority, every member gets their usual amount, usually 2 to 3. So Lincoln's friends are not taking away from the development of the family. And it's not like he doesn't still get episodes with his family members. Aw, look, he and Lana are playing video games together. Cute little bit of continuity. Nonetheless, when we look at the sisters, most of their episodes are primarily out-of-the-house affairs with friends as well, depending on the sister. Lincoln is not the only one quote-unquote guilty of this. Regardless of how one feels about his friends, they have different personalities and established dynamics that set them apart. It makes them very entertaining to watch. The sisters do not have this luxury. With the exception of Leni, the members of their respective groups tend to simply be less extreme versions of whatever loud sister they're associated with. The Morticians Club in particular gets a lot of criticism for this. Except for Boris, who's definitely the breakout star of the group. Move on over, Alucard, you've got competition. When it comes to the others, my apologies to Moon Goats fans, but representation cannot carry a character. And while Sam does have a differentiating feature, her love of animals, this is the last time we ever see it, and it was rarely utilized to begin with. The sisters usually have to carry their episodes and stories on their backs, a burden that Lincoln doesn't have to deal with in his cast of developed and fleshed out buddies. So it was inevitable that the group would have a spotlight season. Lincoln is the main character, the plot follows him, and as a result of him moving to the 6th grade, the writers needed to develop Royalwood's middle school as the new primary school setting. It even got them on the show's advertising material. And with that comes upgrades. They're not just a group of friends, now they're the school's action news team. It's a good fit for them. Lincoln is very charismatic and persuasive, while Clyde's got his experience doing the morning announcements, something he calls back to directly. Sure, they got off to a rough start, but they can cover even the most difficult cases. Even the faculty was trying to find that secret game room. With all of that, the gangs essentially become a second group of main characters. They even get some fun interactions and co-starring roles with the rest of the siblings. Cowpie Kid was a standout, where Lynn recruits Liam for her baseball team to end a losing streak with his pitching skills, and when his arms push to the limit, she takes the championship loss to assure his well-being. Alongside that, we have Lana training Stella's pet rabbit, Lynn asking Clyde for advice, then he gets dragged along in Lola's attempts to impress a new friend. Lana even makes a deal with Liam to take care of her alpaca. How have these two not gotten a full episode together? The group's even starting to get spotlight episodes. We get an in-depth look at Honeycut Farms and how their business runs. It's evident that Liam is still a favorite with the writers, but it was actually Zach who got the honor of a lead role in his own episode. It's got a lot of fun stuff. He fakes a UFO flyby to save face at a party, and then Rusty's showboating sets off this escalating domino effect where the whole town gets involved and creates mass hysteria. It really shows how far they've come. It's been a long time since their days as mere bit part characters. So, with the coming of the Rubner era, we now have a total takeover of Rubner elements. Any traces of Savino's staples are either a lone vestige or put to rest. Luna's musical references, gone. Out-of-pocket humor and parental bonuses, gone. References to the show's very inspiration, gone. How about Ace Savvy and Lincoln's other interests? Rip Hardcore gets some presence in Mrs. Salter's room, she's even a good friend to the man himself, but is otherwise gone for good. Arg gets one last hurrah, but that's it. Looks like the show's executive meddling pushed away even its most loyal fans. And then there's Ace Savvy, who's pretty much gone himself aside from the occasional flashbacks and cameos and a brief mention and rumor has it. He's clearly being phased out of the show. It makes some sense that Lincoln might have soured on it, but seeing such an iconic part of the series disappear is really telling that we're under new managements. And if it's one thing that the new management loves, it's our fantasy elements. They've become more prominent. This is where a lot of the jumping the shark complaints come from. Now we're getting scenarios like Georgia Peach spies moving in next door that plots to take out the local cherry industry, or jumping inside Lily's nightmare to fight off a monstrous flip machination. Oh look, it's Trash Monster from Season 1. Magic is very much a real thing now. Common magazines can now teach people spells, and Lucy can utilize it to fix Liam's arm. I don't mind some of this stuff as much as some of the other fans, as most of the stories are still grounded and relatable, but a criticism I can wholeheartedly agree with is the whole situation with Fairway and Ghosted. Built up as a college of skilled golfers in previous seasons, it's revealed that the university's secret to success is supernatural help from a ghost named Shanks Bogey. They're otherwise depicted as rather helpless and unlucky. Along with being a complete wrench in the show's world building, it trivializes what was supposed to be a prestigious next step for Laurie's development for shock value. And yet, even after all of this, we still get a couple of uses of that lingering Savino method, like flip-faking a UFO sighting using a drone, or how this supposed vampire is actually just an assistant director with an unusually pale complexion. Good stuff, but don't expect it to last. Despite some mishaps, the season did well for itself. We're back up to 3 specials after a dry spell last season, one of which was the first of only 2 one-hour specials in the series' history. And one thing that makes this special particularly interesting is that we have the house going into chaos mode during the intro. Over the past few seasons, we've seen the writers use it as a sort of setting to turn on when the plot calls for it, and as a result, it makes for a fitting bookend, another element of the Rubiner tenure in parallel with the Savino tenure. Still, it's clear that this is shaping up to be its own beast. Lin even said himself that it was the end of an era. Despite how much some of these episodes sucked for him as a whole, Lincoln actually had a very successful season. Schooled was still an excellent example of his oratory skills, and we see just how much more popular he's become with his peers thanks to his leadership of the Action News team. He's revealed to have a beautiful singing voice too, landing him a prestigious concert solo. He has the tendency to pick up on his sister's skills to varying degrees. Luna clearly taught him well. But most of all, this is where his magical prowess would really take off, even wowing the school and showing his friends how cool it can be. He can teleport himself and other objects using smoke. How could you not think that's epic? There's an air of self-confidence and optimism in the things he does, and it's a brilliant continuation of what the movie started. It is the culmination of his character arc, and now he gets to put it into practice. So, now that Ace Savvy's on his way out, what's going to take over as his new favorite franchise? Look no further than Secret Agent David Steele, a fictional spy franchise in clear homage to the James Bond films. We only see it for a couple of episodes, but we do see them follow in Ace's footsteps, solving mysteries and taking down evildoers. In fact, looking back, whether it be with Clinton McLeod, the Dog Squad, or even his family, his love of solving mysteries is a big part of his character. One that you don't really see get talked about all that often. David Steele also gives him the opportunity to have some awesome moments, and unlike with Ace, we can get some gadgets in the mix. Lisa, of course, becoming their go-to gadget girl. But as famous as they are for being a team, they do have the occasional conflict, and this time, it's more serious than a silly flippy cup. We also get a more one-sided example in Flying Solo, showing that Clyde can be a little petty, even if he was rightfully upset by the circumstances. But they always know how to compromise and solve these disagreements. The way their voices harmonize feels symbolic of that. Now, for Clyde, some of that neuroticism does come back. He does call Dr. Lopez quite a few times, but otherwise, he's still playing the voice of reason to his dad's, whose overprotectiveness has gone into overdrive. Looks like Exchange of Heart meant absolutely nothing. Though we do at least get an episode told from their perspective, but around the more rational fear of Clyde growing apart from them. But again, that compromising nature comes through. Oddly, despite having one of the biggest changes thus far, Laurie doesn't have a ton of screen time this season. This does make sense. She's at college, so she's mostly separated from the action. But unlike Royal Woods Middle School, they don't take the time to really develop her new status quo. Fairway itself suffers from a lack of screen time, which is odd given how much last season built up to it. Both of its major appearances this season almost treat it and the way it runs like an over-the-top punchline. Her most memorable outing ends up taking place back at the house, and is by far the most relatable. She's afraid of missing out on the family's inside jokes and growing apart from them as a whole, and her roommate urges her to visit home for a weekend to catch up on things. They did a good job with this one, and as someone who had similar fears in college, I could definitely relate to what Laurie went through. So with Lori gone, how does that shake things up for the next oldest sibling? Leni had some big shoes to fill. The writers took the opportunity to step back from the writing her stories for a bit and focus on her growing leadership skills. The boss maybe has her deal with this shakeup directly, unsure of how to handle babysitting the family, but ultimately gets the encouragement from her friends to apply her growing confidence and authority to the situation. She also runs for office against Mayor Davis, but ultimately throws the election when she can't bring herself to keep up a mudslinging campaign. Mayor Davis even makes direct references to several past episodes during their debate as talking points against her background. You have to be 18 to hold public office anyway, so Leni shouldn't feel bad about this one. We also see her as head of the high school dance committee, and even takes on a case of her own in one of this season's shorts, an affectionate parody to the film noir genre. Her one issue this season is that she briefly attends Lily's preschool, thinking it was her high school for some reason. This feels like a season 1 or 2 Leni joke, something that she'd be way too smart for nowadays. But thankfully, it's just this one episode, and she's even able to use it later to get intel on Lily. Luna's season was a variety show. We get a little of everything she has to offer. The Moon Goats are now an established unit with their own name, and Luna briefly leaves them to chase fame on her own, learning about the cold professionalism of the music industry and the importance of band unity. She promises Mick swagger for the prom, and when he's supposedly absent, she has to do a balancing act between spending time with Sam and faking a Mick performance. Thankfully, the real deal shows up in the end and the two affirm a friendship. She even helps train the upstart Doodads, a band Lynn and Kotaro formed with Harold and Rodney Spokes, and worries about her self-image when they want her to play with them publicly. We get some fun little callbacks from her as well, singing part of Play It Loud at the beginning of the aforementioned episode, and telling her friends about her first experience with Mick Swagger. She and Chunk also give us some fun moments, teaching her roadie tricks and assorted antics in general. He does have an out-of-character moment, wanting to play for sold-out stadiums and willing to take on the cold and professional gig that Luna turns down. This goes against his message in Roadie to Nowhere, but thankfully, this didn't stick. Outside of her near-annual April Fool's Day mess, Luan didn't have a particularly active season. She otherwise had just one focus episode, where she gets to direct a self-written play about her favorite comedian, and when everyone starts taking rather extreme creative liberties, she gets strict on them to the point of quitting, learning to balance the flexibility of theater and the importance of sticking to the script. Mr. Coconut's probably has the most interesting role in this episode, as Luan uses him to bypass her soft side and show brutal honesty. In a way, he's her security blanket if she's not feeling confident about something. So, I've been putting it off for a while, but in honor of this being the last April Fool's Day episode, I think we need to finally address this elephant in the room. These episodes tend to twist Luan's personality into that of a lunatic psychopath, which she then uses to torture her family in many ways. Animal abuse, inciting allergies, near infanticide, physical trauma, defamation of character that forces them to supposedly move, and all sorts of awful things. They do usually one-up Luan in the end, but it doesn't justify what it puts her family through. I'll at least give this last one credit for being a little more clever, being a Silence of the Lambs parody with Luan playing the role of Hannibal Lecter. But even that one ends with Lily being the mystery prankster and the two vowing to team up the following year. There are reasons why these episodes are so hated outside of Luan's die-hard fans, and Lynn and Rita's fear of their child and lack of willingness to discipline her is a reason why so many non-fans think that they're terrible parents. This is a character who's otherwise a good person, and that the show wants us to care about. It'd be one thing if these episodes were non-canon in the vein of Treehouse of Horror or Terror Tales of the Park. That way they could go crazy and not have to care about the narrative implications. While these episodes are never called back to, aside from the aforementioned Silence of the Luans calling back to the other three, these episodes seem to be canon, and that has consequences. Why should we care that she lost the drive for a comedy? Why should we care that her dream died? Why should we care about her relationship hurdles with Benny? It's difficult to sympathize with your character when they turn around and do this. I know it's just a cartoon, but it's a cartoon with love and empathy, and there's a such thing as taking the hijinks too far. Lynn has some interesting things to unpack this season. She seems to have more tense relationships with her siblings at times, meanwhile her relationships with her friends remain mostly positive. Though we do see a rare moment of vulnerability from her fear of roller coasters due to her distaste for throwing up. She's afraid to admit this to her friends, but ends up conquering that fear in the end. I'm not a fan of the gross out in this episode, but it did have a good message about accepting others' fears. Otherwise, sports was the name of the game. Apparently, a goat has a lawsuit against her, which she believes cursed her team with a losing streak. It's probably a reference to the curse of the Billy Goat, which saw the Chicago Cubs go on a 100-plus year World Series drought. But as we saw in Friday Night Fights, this has followed her into football as well. It results in her bringing Lisa in as an offensive coordinator, which improves her game, but she min-maxes the team in a way that would make David Tepper proud, and the team's unity collapses. Thankfully, she has Lynn's friends traded back to the team, and all is well. It's an interesting situation where Lynn ends up playing the voice of reason. Also, note that Lisa stated that teams with feline mascots have a 64% chance of winning their games. When this episode aired, all 4 of the cat teams had terrible seasons. This episode was also an interesting example of how often they have to bend the organization of sports leagues to accommodate Lynn. It's the consequence of making your rough-and-tumble sports character a tomboy. Girls tackle football doesn't exist, only flag football, and at the middle school level, boys and girls baseball is usually split. I know, it's cartoon logic and all, and while bending these rules a little bit to make a good story does work, it's definitely a noticeable little detail. And for a girl that doesn't like being noticeable, she had a pretty by-the-book season. Most of it about her adventures with the Morticians Club, with a little bit of sibling relationships thrown in. Seems like Lucy has a bit of a complex whenever something she feels is hers is encroached upon, something we first saw in A Grave Mistake. Now she feels that Lola's overshadowing her club. It's not a common flaw of hers, but it's interesting that it came back in some form. Oh look, they kept Tristan around. There's more continuity here than people give it credit for. Like we saw in her little birthday mishap, this is the point in the show where they really upped Lana's love of mud and grossness as her go-to gag. Luckily, it takes a backseat in her focus episodes. These are all about the animals. It's unfortunate that the animal shelter she volunteers at is as of now a one-off location. It would have been a good setting to nurture her character growth. It even has Scooby-Doo! Her twin ties to Lola get less focus this time around, but it was cool to see them reference that connection they have with Training Day's resolution. Despite not being affected by the age up much at all, Lola's season was surprisingly active. She definitely spends a lot of time mingling with characters you'd otherwise rarely see her with. Like Lincoln and Lynn before her, she now gets her turn at a Mr. Grouse bonding episode, a rivalry-turned-friendship episode about hunting for treasure and guarding a diamond. There's a lot of good moments that show off her sweeter side. Oh look, she invited Melly to her birthday party. Glad to see that they're still friends. Also, a fun little detail from FamScam, she pretends to have visited France in order to impress her new friend Cricket. If you look at the travel map in the movie, they actually did visit France. Lola, you had some leverage here, you didn't need to lie about this. Lisa's episodes this season would have her take a few steps back. Most have the typical Lisa formula, start with her colder scientific side making an endeavor, then have her sweeter human side take over. But this time around her colder side seems to be the more dominant one, making her look down on others once again. She seems to really hate first grade despite coming to terms with kindergarten. The most egregious case, though, has to be School of Shock. Total character regression in every way. It feels like they brought in Season 1 Lisa for this one. She's a total snob to her teacher, leading to her getting the reins of a substitute teacher and acting insufferable toward her fellow students, which includes her best friend, mind you. Then she has to be bailed out by her teacher when she resurrects a dinosaur she claims is a T-Rex, despite being way too small and long-armed, and it terrorizes the school. By and far one of those dips in the roller coaster of Season 5, Part 1. Fortunately, she does at least still have her goofier side, hosting a fun science show and having to cover up for her claim of finding a dinosaur bone when it turns out to be fake. Though it was leftover bones from the Turgusen Thanksgiving dinner, so technically it was still a dinosaur. Okay, what is it with Lisa and dinosaurs this season? This is also when we start to see Todd again, now as her go-to sidekick and assistant in most situations. The Rubiner era loves robots, so he's here to stay. Lisa's also single-handedly caused Lily's nightmares, but at least she feels more in line with her character growth in this episode, and it seems like she's grown closer to Lily now. And speaking of intelligent siblings, she's free from the shackles of being a baby and can better express her skills and knowledge. This includes being trained to the bargain John and given an extended ability to speak. Not full sentences, but she's able to communicate with the other characters way better, which allows her to get more involved. which includes making a cloud stripe sword out of calamari to slay the giant Flip. She even displays some of Lincoln's manipulative abilities here, pretending not to be potty trained so that she didn't have to attend school. It takes a little convincing from Leni to change her tune. Looks like her swearing habits didn't blow her chance of getting into that fancy preschool after all. Wait, so Potty Mouth gets to have its continuity but Middlemen doesn't? Don't get me wrong, it was a hilarious episode, but come on. Including Lily's Parmesan cheese binge, Lynn and Rita had their fair share of tribulations to overcome. Outside of a fiasco at Lynn's table due to some turned out to be butt-dialed bad reviews, his episodes this season tended to pull him away from the restaurant and focus on his family relationships. For the past few seasons, the show primarily focused on Rita's side of the family, with many mentions of Aunt Ruth and Pop Pop becoming the primary grandfather character. Now, they put some focus on Lynn's side of the family and introduce his father, Leonard Loud, a deep-sea fisherman and seasoned adventurer, which explains his long-term absence so far. He used to be a counselor at Camp Mastodon, Lynn's childhood summer home, and ultimately helps them recover some long-lost pirate treasure to ultimately save the camp. He's an action grandpa like Pop Pop, but is shown to be just as emotional as his son. In fact, Lynn's emotional episodes and general goofball moments have grown much more frequent this season. He gets extremely emotional over Lori last season, and now this extends to the entire family. But his competence has remained intact, and he knows when to get serious or play the voice of reason when the need arises. Rita, meanwhile, got her sole-focused episode, but as usual, it's a good one. Like her husband and Clyde's dads, she too has anxiety about her children growing apart from her, only here it's depicted seriously rather than played for comedy. She decides to go undercover for a news story on high schoolers, which plays to her strengths of youthfulness and analytical writing. Under the guise of a teenager, she hangs out with Leni, Luna, and Luan to get them to open up a little more, and despite Lynn's warnings, Brita continues the ruse after completing the article, with everything falling apart when she's invited over to the Loud House for dinner. Ultimately, she realizes she needs to let her kids grow up and that they need independence, but that they still love her and will come to her when they need her. It's a relatable topic for parents, and doubles as a fun little jaunt for moms nostalgic about their high school days. I've had a few people ask me why I don't do a sort of supporting character stockwatch a la the real Gyms, as this show has a big supporting cast as well. The thing that makes this difficult is that we don't see season-to-season fluctuations in usage like on The Simpsons. One season may have lots of Mr. Burns and little to no Principal Skinner, but then the next may have little to no Burns and lots of school plots for our favorite principal. The Loud House generally uses its side characters at more consistent rates. There's always plenty of Flip, plenty of Mr. Grouse, Scoots is going to be there more than anyone would like, Dog Squad's essentially a second main cast, a few pop-up appearances here and there. Character usage generally changes on the long term instead. Some characters rise and are here to stay, others start to wane for changing circumstances. Mr. Grouse would mostly be saved for smaller but frequent roles this season, usually popping in for a quick joke or two. But he'd get a couple of instances of moving the plot along in small ways. For someone his age, he really gets around town. And as a nice little callback, he fixes the Loud's modem. Once an IT guy, always an IT guy. But his big accomplishment here was scoring his first lead role. We get to see things from his perspective, dealing with the chaos of his neighbors and being driven to sell his house. He rents Flip's mother's cabin in the country while waiting for the house to sell, and despite having his peace and quiet, the lack of social interaction gets to him, pushing him to be an irritating neighbor himself. Towards Mr. Ballhoffner of all characters. In turn, this makes him reflect on his positive memories with the Louds, from the aforementioned Diamonds Are For Never to his bonding with Lynn over the Detroit Lions. Looks like he and Lily even remained close after the Breaking Dad incident. It's a shame they didn't include any callbacks to 11 Louds to Leapin to complete the set, but it was still a sweet moment that showed a lesser seed side of his character. So he reverses the decision, and with the help of his neighbors, he manages to dissuade the new buyers. It's good to be home. Now, if any side character is to be the big winner this season, let's not even kid ourselves, it's Flip. It's absolutely Flip, awaiting the sweet smell of desperation from the audience. He is all over this thing, from major plot lines to small plot movers and quick gags. In fact, he's in about half of the total episodes. He's a flexible character and the writers know it well. Another funny observation is just how often he and Mr. Grouse share scenes in episodes. Looks like they're making the most of John DiMaggio's time in the recording studio. Other cartoons like the aforementioned Simpsons sometimes avoided this for their guest stars, like with Phil Hartman's duo. Looks like that ambition leaked into Flip himself. He apparently attempted to run for mayor at one point. And what about this overturned Flip brand syrup truck? How big is this man's business? But with this plethora of screen time, they did at least add a little more depth to Flip. He too got a spotlight episode from his perspective, this one being a Christmas Carol parody, where we get to see just what made him the scumbag he is. It was Scoots, because of course it was. But it's nice to see some of his kinder and more amicable side. I guess the holidays really bring out the best in him. Looking back, it's not just Flip who won big this season, but the Royal Woods adults as a whole. We learn a lot about their past lives and history with the suburb. Rusty and Zach's dads were best friends, Lynn Sr. and Flip both went to Camp Mastodon, Zach's mom was on the previous middle school news crew, and then Rusty develops the hots for her, much to his chagrin. The most notable example was the episode Diss the Cook, where we see that Chef Pat's been giving Lincoln minuscule meals, and is shown to have a grudge against the siblings as a whole. This prompts Lincoln and Lynn to find the root cause of the problem, which turns out to be hurt feelings over not being invited to Rita's graduation party. She and Chef Pat were actually best friends in high school. She did send her an invite, and with some good deduction, the misunderstanding is cleared up and all is forgiven. It was fun to see what Rita's high school days were like in the late 80s and how she was friends with not just Chef Pat, but also Mrs. Girdle and even Flip to a degree. Along with it, seeing the two friends get the whole gang back together was a heartwarming event. The ending of Grease has the line, "We'll always be together," on repeat, a philosophy that these adults stuck with, and they decided to stay in Royal Woods to raise their children. So many people these days think it as the quote-unquote mature expectation that you have to change cities from your hometown to pursue job opportunities through other means, so seeing the residents stick to their guns is a very hopeful and refreshing change of pace. Sadly, not every adult was a winner here. There were a few that would be pushed by the wayside while others were given the chance to rise in their place. We saw something similar a few seasons ago with characters like Dr. Feinstein. He got hit with Herman syndrome. We already had two major side characters who were sort of goofy, round, bushy mustached men, so his design and niche were redundant, and it's difficult to squeeze him into episodes when his only real material is dentistry, and Rita has long since left the dental profession. Others simply lose out due to changing circumstances. This is exactly what happened to the Royal Woods Elementary cast. Lincoln's the main character, the plot follows him, and with him getting most of the school plots, it left little opportunity for the elementary screen time. Mrs. Johnson would only get a single silent cameo the entire season, and would only get two the next season, and then a complete absence from season 7. Coach Bukowski would be in the same boat, only getting a short scene and then 2 seasons of total absence. Principal Huggins would fare a little better, serving as a plot catalyst in She's All Bat and one of the dinner guests in Much Ado About Noshing, but it was still a huge step down from what he had going last season, and he too would get a total absence in season 7. Cheryl's the only one who made it through unscathed, and this is simply due to her getting a twin sister named Meryl who serves as the middle school secretary. These two would get plenty of antics even outside of school. So, if they're all mostly gone, who's gonna rise up in their place? The friendly, season 1 notwithstanding, bubbly and somewhat silly Mrs. Johnson would be replaced by the intense, no-nonsense Mr. Ballhoffner, an extreme survivalist who has a reasonable side but is mostly depicted as wild and very eccentric. Mrs. Johnson loved Lincoln, Mr. Ballhoffner has a more strenuous relationship with him. It's a shame that they basically ditched Rip Hardcore this season, as Lincoln and the Hoff could have bonded over their mutual interest in wilderness survival. Meanwhile, the more gentlemanly and old-timey Principal Huggins was replaced by the younger and more quote-unquote hip Principal Ramirez. The two are both competent and have their childlike moments, but Huggins tends to put the fundamentals before the fun sometimes, while Ramirez often puts the fun before the fundamentals. It's clear that the writers were going for contrast, wanting to shake up what they could do with their school plots, even if the established faculty still had a lot of potential. One more former elementary character did rise. Unfortunately, that would be Chandler. He would undergo both a change in his personality and uptick in his screen time that would make him the show's biggest scrappy. Back in the Savino years, he was just a sort of dickish popular kid, who wasn't the most pleasant but still kept up his end of his bargains, and could be befriended if you earned his respect. Now, he's a massive jerk with little respect for anyone and some kind of petty grudge against the Dog Squad, Lincoln in particular being his favorite target to mock, prank, or get in trouble with his teachers. I thought you were cool with them now. What happened? What prompted this sudden shift in behavior? During the Savino years, there would be fans who would exaggerate his dickishness into full-blown bullying in fanfiction and fan art. It's possible that the writers decided to buy into this, only for his hatedom to grow. It could have also just been to give Lincoln and his friends an antagonist. He serves as just that in Broadcast Blues, where he inserts himself into the Action News team by providing good equipment, only to make a mess of things in his segments and make the team resort to blackmail to force his resignation. And for another reason, this is more of a theory than anything, but his hatred of Lincoln could stem from petty jealousy. In elementary school, he was the big man on campus throwing all of the parties, while Lincoln's first couple of years had him painted as a loser. Now, he's the loved and respected head of the Action News team, while in Chandler's case, people like his parties, but they don't really like him. It's clear that people are sick of Chandler's shit. It reminds me a lot of Midoriya and Bakugo's dynamic in My Hero Academia. Bakugo was the big man on campus in middle school, while Midoriya was the shy kid who got targeted a lot. Once they got to UA, however, Midoriya was beloved for his virtues and his heroism. His classmates thought he was cool, while Bakugo's jealousy grew, and his classmates would rag on him for his aggressive behavior. Either way, he does at least retain his deal-maker elements, and he likes Zack's mom's cookies. I guess Mrs. Girdle's popular with the guys. And thus, we have another season for the books. Season 5 is definitely one of the more misunderstood seasons of the show. It's often put down for just how much time he spent at school, especially for Lincoln. It was the pinnacle point of many criticisms the show's later seasons would receive. But look past the more shaky executions and you see a clear direction that the series wants to go. It wanted to tackle these big changes in a meaningful way. It's called The Loud House, but there's only so much you can do in such a confined setting, something the writers have realized since Season 2. But at the same time, it's important to know that the show hasn't become a typical school show. It's not the Lincoln and Friends Hour guest starring the Loud family like many think it is. Their prominence had a purpose, and everyone still got their dues. With that in mind, what do you think of the Season 5 wild ride? What are your favorite moments? Let me know in the comments. And if you like rockets and reactors, then you'll be excited for Season 6.